Okay, so we have people joining us from a variety of different places all around the world today. So welcome everybody. And we are going to start off today's session. So welcome. My name is Bethan Edwards and I'm the Academic Director here at Specialist Language Courses. Today I'm going to cover how to approach the OET speaking test. So before starting, we have just a few tips for our session. The lesson is being recorded, but feel free to take notes or make screenshots. But just for you to know that we will be sharing this on our YouTube channel. So don't forget to subscribe. You can find lots of other tips and strategies on there as well. Second, a little point on how we're using Zoom today. So we've got the chat, which you're using already. We'll use that to complete some tasks. We will have polls. You need to answer a poll question by clicking on your chosen answer and then submit. And then at the end of the session, we will have time to do some questions and answers. So any questions that you have, you can put into the question and answer section, and I will do my best to answer them at the end. And third, don't forget to register for our next free live lesson, which will be on OET writing, and Joe will be looking at how to expand the case notes, and that will be on Tuesday, the 28th of September. The link will be available in the chat box for you to register. So let's get started. So we're going to look at OET speaking. We're going to look at what happens. We'll talk briefly about the assessment criteria of OET speaking. We will look at the roll cards, and we will look at what you can find on the roll cards and how you can best use the roll cards. And we'll talk about effective approaches to preparing for the OET speaking. So the first question, what happens in the OET speaking test? So I have got some questions for you. So I have got some statements, and I'd like you to write into the chat box if you think the statement is true or false. So statement number one, the role play is 20 minutes. Do you think this is true or false? Okay, so we've got a mixture of true and false here, interestingly. So we'll have a look at all of our answers in just a minute. So one, we've got a mixture of answers there. Okay, how about number two? The speaking test is filmed, or the speaking test is videoed, similar to other English language exams. So anybody who's taken IELTS, there are some forms of IELTS that might be filmed. So is the OET speaking test videoed or filmed? Okay, so we're getting predominantly false here, I think. Okay, in the OET test, there is a warm-up section. Yes, good. So everybody is in agreement here. So we've got lots of trues. Okay. Number four, the whole test from beginning to end is assessed. From when you walk in through the door to when you leave the room. Okay. We've got some different ideas, but the majority, I think, probably are going for false here. And then number five, there are two role plays. Yes, okay, so we've got a resounding true. So let's have a look at those answers here. So the role play is 20 minutes, true or false? This is true. The role play is about 20 minutes long. The speaking test is not filmed. So unlike some other English language tests, it is recorded. So it's audio only, but no video. There is a warm-up section, that's correct. It lasts about 3 to 4 minutes. Now, the next question, the whole of the test is assessed. This is not true. The warm-up section that we've got here is not assessed. So the warm-up section is a chance for you and the interviewer to get used to each other's voices. And there are 2 role plays. This is correct. So the 2 role plays are 5 minutes each, and you also have some preparation time before you do each role play. So you have 5 minutes per role play, plus about 3 minutes preparation time, plus 3 to 4 minutes warm up, which makes your, here we go, not the role play, the speaking test. So let's change that here. The role play is not 20 minutes. You can see some conflicting information here. We have the speaking test. So the speaking test is 20 minutes and the role plays are 5 minutes each. Okay, so what do you need to do? So let's look at the speaking test format. So in the speaking test, you will play the role of a healthcare professional. So whichever profession you are doing for OET, so if it's medicine, you'll be playing the role of a doctor. If it's nursing, you'll be a nurse, physiotherapist, you'll be a physiotherapist, etc. You need to ask questions. You need to give information to the patient. You need to respond to the patient. So responding to the patient means that you need to listen to the patient and the patient's answers and then respond appropriately. And this is key. And it is often the area that students find very challenging when there's so much going on in the role play. It's quite easy to forget to listen and respond to the patient. You will also need to lead the conversation. Okay. Now, how will you be assessed during the test? So you will be assessed on 2 different sets of assessment criteria. You will be assessed on linguistic criteria. This will assess your language abilities in terms of fluency, pronunciation, and appropriate choice of language. And you will also be tested on your clinical communication criteria. For example, how do you demonstrate that you are able to build a relationship with the patient? How are you able to address and explore the patient's ideas, concerns, and expectations throughout the role play? We'll talk in more detail about the assessment criteria and how you can meet them in our later sessions. Now, we're going to take a closer look at the role card, what is on the role card, and how you can use it in OET speaking. So I'm going to open this up to your ideas again. So those of you who have experience of OET, I'd like you to write in the chat box, what can you find on the role card? What's on the role card? If you haven't had much experience with OET speaking before, put some ideas down. What information do you think you can find on an OET role card? Type your ideas in the chat box now. Okay, great. So we've got some ideas coming in here. So we've got setting, tasks, role. So the role that you need to play. Very good. So what kind of nurse are you, or what kind of doctor are you? Where you're working, absolutely. That's very important. If you're in the emergency department or perhaps in a clinic, then it will be perhaps a different type of conversation. The main purpose of the conversation, yeah, absolutely. And we've got explain. So this might be one of the tasks you need to do. Who you're speaking to, that's also very important. You need to understand who it is that you're speaking to so you can choose appropriate language. And we have an example here. Perhaps you'll be speaking to an angry relative, in which case you need to think carefully about the language that you use, and it may be different to a different situation. Great. So we are going to take a closer look at what you can expect to see on the roll card and then how you can approach this. So here is an example of an OET roll card. So you will find the setting. So this tells you where you are. You will find the information about the patient, and you will find the information about the condition or the issue that the patient wants to talk to you about. And then you will find the tasks. Now, the task will always be in bullet point form, and you will see key verbs in your OET role plays. For example, you might have find out, reassure, explain, suggest, or we have reinforce the need or give advice. So the more practice that you do, the more familiar you will become with these key function verbs, and they're very important in your preparation for OET. So you should familiarize yourself with the kind of function verbs that you can expect to see in the OET role play. So let's have a look at how you can approach the OET speaking, and then we're going to look together and do some role card analysis. So how should you approach the role play? Remember that you have those 3 to 4 minutes preparation time before you start the role play. So it's a really invaluable time where you should make the most of it and work out what to do in that preparation time so that you're ready to start the conversation as soon as your preparation time is up. So it's always a good idea to have a strategy. Many of you who have been preparing for OET will have a strategy and steps to follow for writing. You should do the same thing for speaking. So the OET role play, the recommended steps. First of all, look at the setting and ask yourself some key questions. We're going to look at those key questions in just a minute. Then you should read the background information, for example, the medical issue, any previous treatment, an indication of how the patient is feeling. Then look at the tasks. You remember those bullet points that we saw, and underline the function verbs, for example, explain, reassure, or give advice. Then use the information in the task to predict how the conversation might flow. So it's a good idea to think about where the conversation is going to go so that you can help yourself be prepared. And also make sure that you make a note or you brainstorm useful language for each of the tasks and each of the function verbs, and think about how to start the role play. So we're going to go through each of these steps together now. So using the role card in your preparation time. So you should, during the preparation time, make sure you analyze the task card, so the role card, and ask yourself some key questions. So here are some of the key questions you can ask yourself, which most of you have mentioned already. Where are you? A&E, clinic, etc. Who are you? So what kind of nurse or doctor are you? Who is the patient? And who are you speaking to? So it's important to make sure you notice who the patient is and who you're speaking to, because they may not always be the same person. And what is the issue, or what is the main medical issue? Ask yourself these key questions, then underline the key verbs, make a note of useful phrases, and as we mentioned, think about the flow of the conversation. So let's practice together. So we have a role card here. We have an extract from the role card, and we're going to ask ourselves these key questions. So I would like you to answer the questions in the chat, please. So the first question is, where are you? Okay, so type in the chat. Excellent. So you're in A&E. You're in accident and emergency. Very good. The next question is, who are you? You are a nurse. Excellent. We don't have any more information on this, but you're a nurse and you're in accident and emergency. Great. Who is the patient? It's an interesting question. Who is the patient here? Aha. Great. It's the child. So we've got an extra question here. We want to know who is the patient. My extra question is, who are you speaking to? Excellent. So the patient is the child, but you're speaking to the mother. So it's important that you notice that difference in your preparation time. Okay, and then the next question is, what is the main issue? What is the main medical issue? Okay, the skin issue, which is eczema, and there's been a flare-up. Excellent. Okay, great. So we have our information here. Now, the other thing to note here is this point here. This final point, we've got an indication of the mother's feelings. So it's really important that you look quite carefully at any additional information, as this may help you understand what the flow of the conversation is likely to be. So we can see here that the indication of the mother's feelings, she's refusing to do something. So perhaps you can predict that the conversation, she might not want to listen to your advice, first of all, perhaps. So this information is important to help you understand the flow and the tone of the conversation. So once you've analyzed the setting and you've asked yourself these key questions, the next thing to do is to underline those key verbs in the task. So we have got find out, explain the importance of, reinforce the need, give advice. So the more preparation you do, the more you'll see these verbs recurring. So it's very important you understand them and you think about how you can express this during the role play. So this is the next stage in your preparation time. You need to make a note of useful phrases. So we're going to have a look at some now. So for find out, you could use a phrase, could you tell me? For this one, we have explain the importance of. So this is where we're going to come to you again. So in the chat box, please, can you think of a phrase that you could use for explain the importance of? Let's give you a few more examples on the screen to help you along. For reinforce, we have got it's essential that you, and let me reassure you. And for give advice, we've got, so there are some things you can do to help. It's a good idea to, and we have a gap. So we're looking for numbers 1 and 2. We want to explain the importance of using a moisturized cream. So can anybody think of a phrase you can use to explain to the mother how important it is to use a moisturizing cream? Okay, great. Okay, we've got a suggestion in the chat box. Can you think of some more suggestions for number 1? Okay, great. So for explain the importance, we've got a few suggestions. So we notice that we're really looking at explaining how important something is. So we can use the phrase, it's important to, or it's important that you. We've got some other suggestions. It's imperative, it's vital. Now, these are grammatically correct, but just make sure you think carefully about how strong the explaining the importance needs to be. It's imperative and it's vital suggests that the mother has no other choice. And if you remember, the mother is a little bit reluctant. So just make sure you choose the appropriate phrase for the situation. Okay, and we have other suggestions where you can start with a question. Do you know anything about moisturizing cream? And then you can explain. So you have different ways to approach this, but it's you need to choose a phrase that's suitable for the situation. So then we've got number 2. So number 2 is giving advice. So give advice on managing eczema. So the phrases we've got, there are some things you can do to help. It's a good idea to. Can you think of one more phrase for giving advice? Pop them in the chat box. Okay, great. So again, we've got different phrases for advice. So recommend, I would suggest. And then we have also got the stages that you can follow. So you can ask the mother if she's got any ideas or experience, and then move on to your phrase for advice. I'd advise, I would suggest, or I'd recommend. Great. So let's look at those phrases and compare with the ones we have here. So we have, it's very important that you, which is one you thought of, and here we have, I recommend. Now, the other thing that you really need to think carefully about is the flow of the conversation. So thinking about how the conversation can go, what questions you need to ask, and then being prepared for any changes of direction or any unexpected topics which will come up in your OET. So for this particular conversation, you might start by asking of the mother about the child's skin. Follow this with asking how they usually manage it. Explain why it's important to use moisturizing cream. Ask if they use a steroid cream. Ask why not, because we've seen from the setting that she's reluctant or she may not want to do this. Then respond to her concerns and re-emphasize why it's important and reassure them as appropriate, and then give advice on how to manage the child's eczema. So this is an example of how the conversation might flow. Remember that there will always be perhaps an unexpected point that you never know fully what the patient or the carer is going to say, so you need to be prepared for that as well. So another point that we often have feedback that students struggle with is how to start the conversation. So we are going to have a look at a different role card, and I'm going to show you some examples of how you could start the conversation. So here is the role card. I'm going to give you a minute to look at it and think about it. So remember your key questions. Where am I? Who am I? Who is the patient? Who am I talking to? And what's their main medical issue? Okay, so let's look at some examples of how you could start this conversation. Okay, so we've got A to C on the screen, and we're going to do a poll. So which one do you think is the best way to start the conversation? So I'm going to launch the poll now. So that should come up on your screen. Decide which one. Do you think it's A, B, or C is the best way to start the conversation? Vote now. Okay, great. So I can see you're all voting. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll now, and let's have a look at those results. So most of you have chosen B. So I would agree. I would say B is the best way to start the conversation. So hello, my name is, I'm the doctor on duty today. I see from your notes that you have a dog bite. Can you tell me a bit more about what happened? So you're introducing yourself, you are acknowledging the setting and situation and asking a question that you need to ask on the task card. A can be appropriate, but in this situation, it's a bit too general and a bit too open, and the same with C. So you need to look at the setting and decide what's the best way. Do you have some information already about the patient and the situation, and can you use it when you're starting the conversation? So when you start the conversation, it's usually you should start the conversation rather than waiting for the patient to do so or waiting for the interviewer to do so. You should introduce yourself, explain your role. You should start to develop the rapport and show respect, demonstrate non-judgmental attitude, and find out what the patient already knows about the topic. Now you can see A and E and numbers here. This refers to the speaking assessment criteria that we'll talk about in more detail in some of our other live lessons. So some top tips for OET roll cards. In the preparation time, make sure that you read the roll card carefully, ask yourself the key questions, find out information about the situation, underline the function verbs, think about how the conversation might flow and make a note of useful language. Link the useful language to the function verbs. General top tips for OET, make sure you plan the preparation time in the same way that you plan the preparation time in your writing. Think about what you're going to do and have a strategy and some steps to follow. Be ready to initiate or start the conversation. Respond appropriately to the patient. Remember to listen and respond. Be confident and be ready to adapt. There may be some unexpected responses, so you need to listen carefully and answer your patient rather than moving on through the task cards. Okay. Thank you, everyone. It's been great having you here. So now it's time for questions. So if you've got some questions, can you put them in the questions and answer, please? So we have a question, which is the role play according to participant proficiency. So as the candidate, you're assessed on a variety of different assessment criteria, and you're assessed on your linguistic ability, and you are assessed on your ability to demonstrate the clinical communication criteria within the 5 minutes. Okay, so we have another question. Is the warm-up part considered for the score? So is it assessed? No, it's not. So the warm-up section is not assessed. It is just for you to get used to each other's voices and get used to the interviewer voices. Your assessment is on the 2 role plays, each 5 minutes. How many role plays do we have on test day? You have 2 role plays on test day. So the speaking exam, you have your ID check first of all, the warm-up conversation, which is not assessed. You then get your first roll card. You have 3 to 4 minutes preparation. Then you start the first role play, which is 5 minutes. That then is taken away if it's paper-based or you can't see it anymore. Then you're giving your second one. And the 2 role play topics are not linked. So there's no link between them there on the topic. Is it okay to ask the name of the patient in every role play? Yes, you can. You could also use the preparation time to check with the interviewer as to what you should call them. The only thing you need to be careful of asking the patient's name is not taking up too much time within your 5 minutes. So just ask them quickly, what shall I call you? And then move on. You just have to be aware of the 5 minutes. And if you don't use the patient's name in every role play, that's also okay. And I have another question. Is it okay if I'm not able to complete the task because I run out of time? This is a good question, and one we get a lot from students. You should aim to complete all of the tasks, but if you miss one task at the very end of one of the role plays, it doesn't mean that you will not pass your OET, as long as you're demonstrating the clinical communication criteria, you lead the conversation and you respond to the patient, it's still possible to be able to pass OET, even if you miss out one of those bullet points at the end. Okay, we have another good question, which is signposting important? Absolutely, a really good question and really important. So one of the criteria that you're assessed on is how you are able to signpost the conversation. So you need to be able to guide the patient through the conversation with phrases like, first, I'd like to ask you some questions about, then I'm going to explain, and after that. So signposting is really important there. Okay, so that's all the questions we have time for today. So thank you very much for coming, everyone, and thank you for all of your questions. And again, don't forget to register for our next free live lesson, which is on Tuesday, and the link will be in the chat. And we really hope you enjoyed the lesson today. And if you did, we're going to be giving them weekly. So make sure that you stay tuned to all of our social media platforms. You can find the links in the chat. This is where we'll be announcing our live sessions each week. If you are currently preparing for your OET, we have the perfect course for you. We have Reach OETB Nursing and Reach OETB Medicine. These courses will guide you through the format of the test, helpful vocabulary and grammar that you need for your OET exam. We also have a brand new OET practice test that you can use to help with your timing and familiarize yourself with the OET exam, each paper of the OET exam. And we have the OET writing correction service if you would like some feedback on your writing. So all of the links will be in the chat box. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us on our webpage, specialistlanguagecourses.com, and use the chat function, or you can contact us on inquiries@specialistlanguagecourses.com. Okay, that's it from me, everyone. Thank you very much for coming today. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.